Good morning, everybody. My name is Michelle Wright from Cause 4. Great pleasure to see you all and Happy New Year. For the purposes of the tape, I'm a white woman in my 40s and I'm wearing a grey jumper. I have shoulder length brown hair. We're suggesting that people have cameras off during the speaking because we've got such a large group, but there will be a breakout session where obviously it would be brilliant if you could have your cameras on to work with colleagues. The chat function is disabled for the session, but the Q&A function is enabled. So if you have any questions during the session, please pop them into the Q&A function. Every question that comes up today as part of the session will be responded to, but after the session. So we will distribute a write-up of questions and answers following the session. And that's quite important also from the breakout groups. You will receive answers to questions that are posed if they're in that Q&A function. And finally, for housekeeping, if anyone requires BSL, would you also just pop a note into the Q&A and we'll make sure then that the breakout is supported. Fantastic. Well, welcome to this Transforming Governance session. We're looking in this programme on obviously governance, effective leadership, strategy, recruitment, and specifically today about the implementing the investment principles. The structure of the session, we've got two speakers today, myself and Holly Smith-Charles from Arts Council England. We'll then have a breakout session for you to have a chance to work with colleagues. And then we've got Jo Verrant from Unlimited as guest speaker, who's going to talk about her experience of implementing the investment principles. There'll be a short 10-minute break as well towards the end. Okay. So today we're focusing mainly on ambition and quality, dynamism, and environmental responsibility, because inclusivity and relevance is the subject of another session. We're going to think about the Let's Create strategy as a whole, an overview of the investment principles as a reminder, and I'm sure we all know them well, how the investment principles can guide effective practice, how in terms of our boards and our governance we best reflect the investment principles, and also just thinking about Arts Council England requirements in relation to the investment principles. You know, what are we finding easy to navigate? What's more challenging? What might be some tips to think about the sort of next stages for boards to implement the investment principles? So I'm going to hand over to Holly Smith-Charles from Arts Council, who's going to go through the kind of refresher and reminder from Arts Council's perspective of the investment principles.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. And thank you very much for taking the time to be part of this workshop. My name's Holly Smith-Charles, and I'm the Arts Council lead for Transforming Governance. I'm a white woman with light brown hair, and I'm wearing a bright blue jumper. Next slide, please. So as Michelle says, I think we're all very familiar by now with the investment principles, but just to recap, really, they're part of Let's Create, which is, of course, our strategy for culture and creativity. And in it sets out our vision for the next 10 years, not just the outcomes that we'd like to see, but also the investment principles that we think should underpin this work. So the how as well as the what and the why. And there are four of them: ambition and quality, dynamism, environmental responsibility, and inclusivity and relevance. And for the Arts Council, these four investment principles are essentially the key characteristics of what a well-run modern cultural organisation looks like. It's some of it we'll be doing already as a sector, some of it will be adapted depending on your organisation, but it's a kind of overarching sense of of what good looks like. And for us, this matters because we think that applying these principles will enable us working together as a sector to better achieve the outcomes of Let's Create, and to maximise the return on investment of the public money that we're investing into the national portfolio. And also really to demonstrate that investment in culture really matters and really makes a difference. So for you as boards, I think there's a key role that you have in encouraging your executive teams to embed the principles. And that's both in the sort of culture and operation of your own organisation, so that it's a process of continuous improvement. So we know that for some organisations, they'll be stronger in some areas than others, and it's very much a process of change. And we want to see boards and executive teams working together to learn from best practice and set targets for how you might improve and develop over the course of the portfolio. I think it's sort of stating the obvious, but I think for a lot of you, you'll be thinking, well, we do this anyway, like this will be very familiar, it's a matter of common sense, and you'll need little support and encouragement to adopt some, if not all, of the investment principles. But we do recognise that others need support in embedding them, and so we've got a range of resources to help organisations and boards that you can access via our website or through conversations with your relationship manager or our customer services team as well. Next slide, please. So first of all, I just want to spotlight, as it were, our investment principle support organisations, or IPSOs as they're known. So they are also members of the portfolio, so they're kind of living and breathing the investment principles and the reporting requirements and all of that at the same time as the national portfolio organisations will be. But what the IPSOs do is focus on one investment principle or many of the investment principles where they have particular expertise and experience to support other organisations in implementing them. So, for example, Cause For, who are hosting the session, run the Arts Fundraising and Philanthropy Programme, and that's around supporting fundraising knowledge and skills. And so they work across all 4 of the IPs and with a range of art forms and disciplines. Other organisations might be focused on 1 or 2 of the investment principles, or targeted at a particular art form or geographical area. So you can find IPSOs that hopefully will be able to support the work that you're doing. There's around 30 or 40 of these IPSOs, and there is a database on our website on the Investment Principles Resource Hub. So you can browse by categories, by themes or IP, and the types of support that they offer to find support. So I'd really urge you to talk to the investment principles support organisations to support your work in this journey. And if you're not familiar with the Investment Principles Resource Hub, or if you haven't looked at it since making your application, do have a look on our website. There's loads of information in there about how you might embed the investment principles into your organisation, and it's regularly updated with new content. So there are the essential reads that you would have seen when you did your application, but we've also got toolkits, case studies, videos. We held a big event last year called Let's Debate, which was really kind of digging into what the different investment principles mean in practice. And there are recordings from those sessions as well. So yeah, do have a look on our website as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to recap on some of our reporting requirements. Illuminate is another tool that's worth bearing in mind. So as you know, all NPOs and IPSOs are required to submit data regularly about their funded activity and audiences. And for most NPOs, this is via audience surveys and ticketing data, as well as the annual survey. But I think it's worth just emphasising that, of course, Illuminate's also very helpful for helping you embed the investment principles. It supports your kind of improved data culture, so part of the dynamism principle. It can help with audience development by kind of systematically tracking who your audiences are. And we hope that it will enable you to access valuable information through the insight and analysis functions, so you can understand better where and whether your work is relevant and how you can deepen your reach. So as a leadership team, what it provides, we hope, is that you'll have that audience data at your fingertips to help you as a board and as a leadership cohort to make informed, data-driven decisions. Yeah, so that's Illuminate. Next slide, please. And then these are just 3 other examples of the tools and resources that are available and are all free to use and available on our website. These aren't mandatory, but they're we'd encourage you to have a look and see whether they can support you in terms of delivering the activities that you've got as part of your investment principles plan. And so the first is the Impact and Insight Toolkit. And this is it's a free evaluation and survey tool, and it gathers and analyses feedback from the people who experience or interact with your work. And that might be staff, it might be peers, it could be members of the public. And it helps very much with evaluating your work and measuring progress, particularly against the ambition and quality principle. So it gives you an opportunity to shape what things you want to measure and how in terms of judging, because of course ambition and quality, they're both quite complex terms. They mean different things to different organizations at different stages of their development. So this is a tool to help you really dig into that investment principle. And it's not mandatory, but it was developed for and with the sector, so do have a look at that one. We also have the Environmental Responsibility Programme, and that's delivered by Julie's Bicycle. It was designed to support the portfolio and the wider sector to embed the environmental responsibility investment principle and to take action to respond to the climate crisis in a way that's appropriate for you and your organisation and the work that you do. And there's a range of resources and programmes to support you, including an Environmental Champions programme that's specifically aimed at board members that launched I can't remember exactly when, but late last year that came on stream. So that's got free to access tools as well to help you calculate things like your carbon footprint. And there's various opportunities to take part in webinars or peer discussions so that you can kind of learn from one another as well. Again, you don't have to use any of this, but if it helps to support your goals, then those tools are out there. And then finally, I just wanted to flag the Digital Culture Network. So this is Arts Council's team of tech champions, and they're based all across England, all with different specialisms. And they offer free one-to-one support and expertise in a whole range of areas around digital strategy and marketing, website creation, e-commerce, box officing, ticketing. So again, if you're looking at your business model or your use of data or anything like that, they can be very helpful. It's free support and it's available to all creative and cultural organisations and individuals as well. Next slide, please. So this slide is a recap of the information that we shared at the welcome sessions last spring that I'm sure a lot of you attended, but I thought it was worth just repeating some of this. So all MPOs and IPSOs need to have a board or equivalent oversight group in place, and we ask that you have at least 4 formal meetings per year. It's vital that public money is spent well. We all know this, and having an active board or oversight group, so good governance, is a really key part in ensuring this. The executive will take responsibility for the day-to-day delivery of the funding agreement that we have with you, but we do look to our boards and oversight groups to take responsibility for overseeing how that funding agreement is applied, and especially agreeing and then monitoring progress on the targets and success measures, and to hold the executive, to account where needed. We understand that in many cases, we're only one source of income for organisations, and that you'll have wider considerations and other funders that you need to report to. So your board meetings need to work for you, and the structure of those is of course up to you. But what we've got on the list there are the board papers that we need to see for our reporting requirements. Again, for most of you, much like the investment principles, these are going to be common sense and papers that you would be using to structure your meetings anyway and to structure your conversations. And we use these papers both to check on the progress you're making and the success measures, and also to gauge how active you are as a board in monitoring progress. So it's really critical that kind of capturing of those conversations. it's critical that we have them, but we do recognise that every organisation and every board will be different in its type and its scale and its access needs, and that you will have your own approach, and that's fine. Thinking about the investment principles specifically, I thought it was worth just drilling down on the requirements, that last one around quarterly progress reports and what we mean by that. Next slide, please. So the quarterly reports should record the activity that your organisation has undertaken towards the success measures set out in your funding agreement with the Arts Council. So that's essentially your activity plan and your investment principles plan. And we expect that the activity reporting is shared with you as the board or oversight group, and that this is then documented in the minutes. So the minutes are a really key way of just capturing the conversation and decisions that have been happening. And it's, where applicable, these plans should also capture areas where, insufficient progress is being made, or where the board might have concerns, and what actions you're taking to mitigate risk or to support progress and performance. And we'd strongly encourage you to use the Arts Council templates so that you've got everything covered. But again, you're not required to, as long as your reporting covers all the areas that we need to have updates on. So again, if there's any issues, do talk to your relationship manager about how you're reporting. I won't talk in depth about the activity plan. We covered all of that back in the welcome session, so hopefully you're in the swing of that. But that essentially covers how you're contributing to the Let's Create outcomes and their associated elements. But the investment principles plan, so essentially this is a tool to help you as a team, as a board, to consistently keep track of how your organisation is doing in embedding the investment principles and checking what actions you're taking to kind of achieve these goals. So fundamentally, it's a tool for you as an organisation to monitor progress and make change. And then it's a tool also to share with us in quite a systematic way how you're doing. So part of your funding agreement is to provide quarterly updates on progress against agreed actions for us. And that is a mandatory requirement, but we also hope that this process is also a starting point for a dialogue between one organisation and the Arts Council, but also for the sector as a whole, about the successes and challenges that you're facing in being or becoming an ambitious, high quality, dynamic, inclusive, relevant and environmentally responsible organisation. In other words, how you're doing against those investment principles. If you are using the Arts Council template, it has got space for updates, and there's a tab for each of the 4 IPs. And every quarter, the plan should be completed with actions that you're taking in that period towards your investment principles plan. And just as the bullet points show, that's planned, in progress or established. And again, there's space to note any challenges that you've faced. I won't go into any more depth than that at this point, but just to say that there's lots of information on reporting requirements and templates on our website in the section here for current MPOs and IPSOs. Or of course, you can talk to your relationship manager or customer services as well. Next slide, please. So just to kind of summarise, really, the board's role is really vital in helping to demonstrate the value that creativity and culture brings for your own organisation and the communities that you work with and serve, but also, as I said at the start, to embed the investment principles and show what a modern, well-run cultural organisation looks like. And that really helps to demonstrate our sector's huge public benefit and to increase that public benefit so that we've got a really strong case for investment. So this all kind of, it's the kind of individual organisation picture, but also as a sector as a whole. It's also a way to share progress and challenges against your activity and investment principles plans. When I hand back to Michelle, she's going to talk in a bit more detail about what this might mean in practice for you. But I think it's worth noting that for us, we very much see reporting as an opportunity to share learning and progress and challenges between the staff and board and the exec teams and the board, but also with us as in dialogue with the Arts Council as well. It's definitely a process and a journey. The investment principles are still relatively new. And so we hope that even if everything's not going as expected, we want to see just, what plans are in place to kind of address that. We don't expect that every board meeting will include discussion of every initiative on your investment principles plan. There just isn't time to do that. But our hope is that you'll work together with your team to kind of find a structure to the meetings and a way to ensure progress that makes sense for your organisation. And linked to that, just to reiterate that final bullet point, you're not required to use the Arts Council templates so long as your reporting in whatever format covers everything we need for monitoring. It is a more detailed level of reporting than in previous rounds. We're conscious of that. But as well as containing all the prompts that you need to provide the right level of monitoring detail, we do hope that the templates can be useful for keeping you as the board regularly cited in quite a systematic and consistent way on the progress and any risks so that you can respond and plan accordingly. And we're working hard to ensure that our reporting processes are accessible and to provide information to support organisations. And I gave some examples of the support that's out there. But yes, every organisation will be different, and do talk to us if you have any further questions. But I'll hand over to Michelle, who's going to just talk about this in practice a bit more.
Great. Thank you so much, Holly. So I'm sort of going through, some of the headlines the Arts Council have given us as funded organisations in terms of what we should be thinking about. Our organisation is an IPSO. We have an oversight committee, not a charity board. So I'm also going to share some of the things that we're finding easy to navigate and some of the things we're finding much more challenging as we go through. So the kind of 4 headlines that we've taken through from our reporting are to have board development days or specifically focused time with a board to focus on the principles. Just in putting together the application, our boards came together to obviously be able to think about the principles, how we were going to apply them in application. And obviously that needs to continue to go through in terms of specific focus time for our boards in thinking about how successful we're being in applying the principles. We need to think about how our skills and expertise of our boards are supporting the embedding of the principles, and I'll talk a bit more about that shortly, because it is all new and we need potentially different skills and different expertise than we might have previously had on the board to be able to respond to the Arts Council requirements. Arts Council have suggested possibly assigning responsibility to relevant subcommittees or individuals, and certainly some organisations to find enough time to be able to discuss the principles in detail, have formed subcommittees or had particular trustees or board members assigned specifically with looking at sections of the investment principles. And again, I'll come back to that in a moment. And to make sure that the investment principles are standing agenda items for board meetings in much the same way as we expect the business plan or strategy to come back to each board meeting, the investment principles embedded as part of that to come back consistently so that as board members we can retain the information and understand what we're reporting against, I think has been incredibly important for our organisation, so that we can see what progress we're making because it's consistently part of our board agendas. So to go through some of that just in a little bit more detail, again, these are the sort of Arts Council headlines that I'm responding to. The first is the skills and knowledge on the board. You know, what are the gaps? How do we invest in the skills development as needed? We already, certainly for charitable boards, but any type of board, have a huge number of responsibilities as volunteers. You know, the charity commission guidance is getting more and more intensive at the same time as our funders are expecting more. And this Arts Council investment round, I think, is a really good example of that. So, you know, more expectation, more for us to do, more monitoring, more oversight from all types of boards and different scales of organisation. And this is challenging. I think often in terms of skills, boards take a very formulaic approach. So we sort of perhaps do a skills audit, and we identify that we need a finance person or a legal person and somebody that has oversight of our artistic or curatorial program. And those things are obviously really important. We do need those skills for sure. But really, we need skills that will meet the needs of our strategy and our Arts Council funding ambitions for that period of that funding or that strategy. So I think thinking about skills in that context rather in a kind of formulaic way can be really helpful. I've been working with some organizations that are building their boards to meet the requirements of their strategy for a 3-year period. So they're actually recruiting trustees and board members for that period of delivering the business plan, which feels really smart and comfortable to me. So for sure, in terms of Arts Council requirements, there will be areas where we might need more or different skills. So we might need to increase our financial reporting, or we might need to increase our artistic knowledge in areas around ambition and quality, for example. I think from our perspective, it's been incredibly important to have board members and committee members that are also having to apply the investment principles, that are navigating the process, that are learning what they need to put in place, because that has just been incredibly valuable in terms of the dialogue that we've had at board meetings. And the other aspect is sharing, of course, with peer organisations. The investment principles support organisations have working groups where we learn from each other and we speak to each other about how we're applying this sort of knowledge, how we're evidencing it, what templates we're using, where there might be some flexibility from Arts Council. And again, I know that's another kind of time requirement, but to have those conversations has been very important, because otherwise we're just kind of navigating individually as organisations rather an overwhelming set of circumstances and information requirements. In terms of the second point, that who will lead different areas and how they will report back to the wider governance structure, for organisations that have a really quite a high level of Arts Council funding, I've certainly seen many create a subcommittee structure that will give them time to be able to, boards time to really be able to understand what their responsibilities are. Obviously, for any type of board, the danger with that, whilst there's a huge kind of positive to it in terms of having proper time to consider what we're required to do for Arts Council, the negative to it is potentially for other board members, they think, well, that's being taken care of over here, so I don't have to worry too much. Of course, for any type of board, it's a team effort. We need to understand together what we have to deliver. And for charitable organisations, the collective of the trustees are collectively responsible should anything go wrong in terms of our organisation, and certainly therefore in terms of meeting funders' requirements. So we need times where we bring it all back to the whole board, and that the whole board is completely clear of what they're responsible for and not. But having some additional time as part of a subcommittee for further investigation, for talking to other organisations and learning from them about their application of the investment principles, I think can be very helpful. Similarly, having a lead board member or board members for particular investment principles can be helpful in a similar way. If we have people that can take the time to understand the new requirements, how we're delivering against them, where we might need to amend or develop, that can be useful. In terms of thinking about the outcomes we want to achieve and how we're sort of holding the organisation to account, I think what many of us are facing is this overwhelm of information, new requirements and new responsibilities, more that we have to do. Again, this is sort of Arts Council guidance, but one thing our organisation has done very practically is to pop those outcomes onto a one-page sheet, and that's actually what we use to drive the conversations at each board meeting. It means as board members, trustees, oversight committee members are seeing information consistently from one organisation, from one meeting to the next. From one meeting to the next, and that we've consistently taking an overview of the same information that isn't too overwhelming because of the way that it's presented. Holly mentioned the regularity, and I think again it's like good practice from a board perspective in terms of the analysis of strategy, that we're bringing back the strategy or the business plan requirements in different ways to each board meeting, so that we can have consistent and regular review and learning for that particular cycle. Different organisations of different scales will have different weighting to different investment principles. So we, as an investment principle support organisation, chose to take forward all four investment principles, and we therefore report on all four. But we have, in terms of our weighting of activity, far higher commitment to, for example, the dynamism and ambition and quality principles than to the other two. So we've got to be mindful of that, again, in terms of the weighting of discussion and expectation at board meetings, that are that the activities are kind of weighted accordingly. A very kind of big area at the moment is, as we all know, arts, cultural heritage organisations are facing, as the wider charity sector and other industries are, a kind of compounding set of issues and challenges that we're all grappling with. So, not only are we recovering from COVID and audiences, we've got funding challenges, we've got cost of living, we've got different types of audience behaviour, we've got issues in terms of local authority funding. All those things are kind of compounding and coming together. Arts Council obviously has its own very detailed requirements because this is public funding. Any funder, though, will see funding to any organisation as an investment. And this is where the board has such an important role to play. There will be things undoubtedly in a number of organisations' activity plans as they set out to Arts Council or other funders that can't be delivered because of that very complex set of external circumstances that we're all facing. We need to have proactive conversations with our funders when we need to change activities or things can't happen in the way that we originally envisaged. And in the organisations that I work with, there's obviously a huge amount of fear in doing that. Fear that we won't be funded again, fear that there'll be some judgment, fear because obviously we set out a particular ambition and perhaps that can't be realised in the way that we would wish. I think if board members can really be supportive of organisations having proactive conversations with funders, with Arts Council, that's very, very important. The funders, certainly in the dealings I have with funders tend to be incredibly supportive unless there are particular surprises or the organisation hasn't been honest or had regular discussions if things need to be amended or changed. So in terms of this outcome framework, proactive conversations with funders, being able to amend activities should we need to, and also obviously our sector needs are changing, so Arts Council and other funders I'm sure will be completely supportive if we need to change activities because actually the needs of our beneficiaries and audiences are changing faster than we perhaps anticipated. And then there's the aspect of data. This is the same kind of point really in terms of consistency in the information that we're taking forward to board, that we make sure that that's backed up with good data, that we're improving our processes as we can in our organisation, because whilst we have quite a big portfolio, we're only quite a small team of 10 people. We're trying to minimize and be very efficient with data, and therefore changing the templates or the communications where we can in discussion with Arts Council, if that is making life easier in terms of our delivery. There's then the risk management aspect. We're required, as Holly said, to submit a risk register for the organisation. Most boards will have that as a formal requirement, and those of you that are structured as charities will know that you are required to have one from a Charity Commission point of view as well. It's a simple thing to say, but I think framing the investment principles as part of that risk register is useful, because then the whole board will be paying attention to that as a key aspect of risk planning for your organisation. And it makes complete sense, because obviously if our funding fails or we're not able to deliver in the way that was originally anticipated, then that presents a key risk for the organisation. I think also something that's new from Arts Council is this quarterly kind of playback from their perspective of the risk that your organisation, the sort of risk level that your organisation might be under. Those risks are obviously the same for every organisation. There will be things that happen that we can't prevent. For example, if a key member of staff leaves, then it might be that risk rating rises. These are parts of the running of organizations, the kind of regularity of organizations. And again, I don't think we should be fearful of discussing where we are, or changes to strategy or needs to change activities with Arts Council very proactively as we see them. And then there's the way that investment principles link into strategy. I think because obviously the way that we as organisations are structured and our reliance on particular aspects of funding and funding streams from different funding sources varies enormously. Some organisations will be very reliant on Arts Council. For others, the Arts Council funding will form an important but perhaps much smaller part of the overall income stream. The nature of how we're being asked to report and the sort of increase in governance oversight for the Arts Council reporting in particular, I think presents a danger insofar that we see this, or can be dealing with it as almost a separate activity to our key organisational strategy. In terms of our organisation, we can cope with that very, very well. So we've absolutely embedded the Arts Council activity as a key part of our overall organisational strategy, but also the investment principles as well. So we see them as a running strand across the overall strategy. And therefore, from an oversight committee perspective, and also from a wider board perspective, it means that we've got a greater handle on our responsibilities as board members in terms of prioritization. I say at the moment, and especially I think in January, when we all come back from hopefully a bit of a break, it can feel very overwhelming in terms of what we have to deliver, how we're going to navigate through difficult external circumstances, how we're going to meet the requirements of funders. And the balancing of activities in that way is obviously therefore completely critical. Really effective boards have a real grip on prioritization of what the organization is doing. They act as both an accelerator and a brake. What are we going to accelerate because we're able to and we have capacity to do so? What needs to be changed, amended, or stopped? And I think therefore embedding the Arts Council investment principles activity as part of overall strategic plan gives an oversight for a board to be able to do that more effectively. So, for sure, right now, effective boards will be gripping that prioritization in just the way that I articulated. What are we going to do? Because it's the most important thing for our organization, its future, our audiences and beneficiaries. What are we going to pause and what are we going to need to stop doing? Because we need to create space for other things. And in that way, that flexible conversation and proactive conversation with Arts Council becomes really, really essential as well. We need to meet the requirements of the wider business environment. We still need some agility in terms of responding to opportunities, to not be bogged down in the administration and sort of bureaucracy. And again, in terms of how we're spending time, this is where boards can really help executive teams that will need more resources and capacity. If Arts Council represents 50% of your income, then obviously we're going to have to have a sort of greater amount of time allocated to that activity at board than if Arts Council represents 5% of our activity. So for boards to be very kind of clear-sighted about how we're spending time linked to the importance of Arts Council in terms of the overall income is really important. And as Holly said, to discuss adaptation of templates with Arts Council. In terms of the kind of standardization of reporting information, we can absolutely see how that's important for Arts Council in dealing with the investment of the portfolio as a whole. It can be much more challenging for us as individual organisations to be able to respond to if it means that we're creating different sets of documents outside of already created documents. Or if we're a disabled-led organisation that we're having to adapt perhaps 2 or 3 times particular documents. So we need to discuss that adaptation of templates with Arts Council to make sure that we're just, again, not creating more overwhelm in the administration. And then just finally sort of thinking and reflecting on evaluation, because obviously there's the evaluation of the overall success of Arts Council programme for us as a whole and as individual organisations. And as board members, we'll be looking at the evaluation of our strategy and business plan. There's that classic difficult dynamic for board members where we've created a strategy or a set of activities that we're committed to, but actually, if someone were to ask us, is that successful? Are we on the right path? That it can be very difficult to answer. So just thinking about the kind of overall 3-year or 4-year horizon for particular aspects of funding and strategy, I think it's useful, obviously, to think about the investment principles as part of that overall evaluation as well. So the Centre for Cultural Value has articulated this embedded evaluation model. They have 4 principles: how beneficial it is, how committed the organisation is to learning, ethical and applicable, the robustness of the evaluation, and how people-centred it is, and how connected. So how transparent are we as an organisation, and is the information shared and our learning shared? So they're sort of just on a final point, their sort of articulation of this, that if we're going to be successful and the investment principles kind of roll out successful, then it will have more chance if they're embedded systematically and cultural organisations work collaboratively to apply them. So we want to make sure we've got those principles of reflection and learning, we're objective and critical, that we're building them into every stage of delivery from planning to end, so they're embedded in strategy, that we're using them to inform future developments, and that they're formalised and shared with key partners and key funders. All right, so we're going to have a break now, a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we'll outline the breakout session for discussion. So look forward to seeing you in 10 minutes. All right, so welcome back. We're now going to go into breakout rooms. The discussion sort of question is in the breakout rooms as well, so you'll have access to it. But it is what have been the opportunities and challenges in your organisation to ensure you're embedding and implementing the investment principles effectively? What processes or ideas have supported the process? You'll be sent an invite to a breakout room shortly. What we would really like you to do is to nominate somebody to scribe and post 2 or 3, 4 points as a summary of your discussion into the Q&A afterwards. And also, if you have any additional questions that you would like answered, to pop them in the Q&A as well. All questions, I say, will be answered post the session, and everybody will get access to those. We've got about 15 minutes to have this conversation, and then we'll bring everybody back for the guest speaker. So I hope it's a really fruitful, interesting conversation. You should receive a link now, and we'll see you back here shortly. Great. And so I'm delighted to welcome Jo Verrant from Unlimited, who's going to do the final talking for this session in terms of her organization's experience around the investment principles. So over to you, Jo.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've got some slides. They include pictures of art, because I thought at the end of today, the thing that we should be left with is the fact that we are all working in the art sector. So it's a blue image, Unlimited logo, and somebody in pink leotard looking up wearing a headdress. Next. My name's Jo Verrant. I'm the director at Unlimited. There's a headshot there of me. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a 50+ white woman with fading blue hair, tending towards the plump, sitting at home in Wakefield. Next. An image of somebody in a carnival costume, bright green, lovely, outside the South Bank Centre. Next. So what does Unlimited do? We commission extraordinary artworks, all by disabled artists. We back disabled artists. We challenge the cultural sector by doing that, and also in a whole host of other ways. And through all of this, we're trying to change the perceptions of disability. Next. We commission across all art forms. This is an image of two dancers, one who happens to be a wheelchair user. Next. We have 5 strands to our activity. So commissioning disabled artists, obviously the absolute key one. But we also have a strand called Connect, and that's about connecting those artists to the cultural industries and vice versa, connecting the industries to disabled artists. We have a strand called Develop, which is about developing the knowledge and the skills of all those we work with, artists and cultural sector. We have a strand called Support, which is about supporting disabled artists to have sustainable careers. And we have a strand called Change, which is the whole reason for our existence. We're here to bring about lasting positive change. And when that happens, our aim is to close. Next. Another image of some of our work. This is 2 dancers in a hospital setting, either side of a young person in a bed, who's joining in with that dance work. Next. We have 4 values. We are unlimited, and by that we mean we don't necessarily have to follow the way in which things have always been done in the past. We value artists and put them central within a lot of our processes, as many as we can. We define ourselves as radical and are endlessly arguing about what that means. And we value equity rather than equality. We think we need to do things differently to reach a whole range of people. We're very proud of our commitment to intersectionality. Next. A painting of a Dalek on a 70s wallpaper, which is purple with yellow flowers. Visual arts, another big part of what we do. Next. The other thing to know about us before I can even start to talk about the investment principles is where we kind of fit within the UK around disabled people, really. So 22.7% of the working age population are disabled people in the UK. And it's also important to note that 60% of the deaths from COVID have been disabled people. So my community has been decimated. COVID is not over. In fact, we're going through the biggest resurgence that we've had since the pandemic began. Yet when we come to look at the arts stats, which Arts Council really helpfully publish, we know that only 7% of staff, 9% of board members, and 8% of arts audiences are disabled people. So our job is to try and change those stats, to provide more product, to provide more support and guidance, etc. For us, our board is 93% disabled people, and our staff, we average 83. We're just about to update these because we've got some staff and board changes at the moment. Next. It's a textile work, very complex woven tapestry with many, many different elements on it. I can, in pinks, blacks, purples, I can see an octopus, a monkey, a cat, and a CD-ROM. Next. So, the investment principles, how the hell do they work within our organisation? So we have a senior management team of 4. So each one of us leads on one investment principle. The board obviously get quarterly reports on those activities and on our progress. And the IPs often form discussion sessions for board mini meetings. So we have board meetings, and then we also have board mini meetings. I would disagree with something that was said earlier. We did have to change our board structure to fit with the reporting requirements. We used to have 3 main meetings, and then in between we would have mini meetings. So we used to meet every 2 months, but we had to go to a quarterly structure because it was the only way we could fulfill our reporting requirements. So I think sometimes we do have to shift, sadly, our innovative, dynamic ways of working in order to fit with the computer-driven, process-driven reporting requirements of some funders. Next slide. Underwater wheelchair. Who knew? Picture of somebody in a wheelchair, water, coral, fish, beautiful image, one of the original Unlimited commissions back in 2012. Next slide, please. So the investment principles were new to all of us. We found 2 of them incredibly easy to adopt and integrate into what we're doing. Inclusion and relevance, partly because it's what we do, it's our bread and butter. We have so much activity that already fills that. We found that a really easy one to kind of progress along with. And the other one that's really easy for us is dynamism, because having been a programme for 10 years, we made the shift and became an independent organisation. So as we were at the beginning of that process, we were already going through a whole number of choices about how we would work best to support our heavily disabled team. So we have a geographically dispersed team, we have a central hub in Wakefield, we have very high levels of flexible working, a whole range of things which naturally we were trialling. We have an action research approach. All of these things we were trialling fitted very neatly within the dynamism investment principle and have been very easy for us to report on. Next. It's been reasonably easy / moderately hard to do our work around and plan our work around ambition and quality. It's worth noting that when we put our application into Arts Council and got our successful MPO badge back, we were told to reduce our ambitions for all of our investment principles. There was a feeling that we were trying to do 3 years' work in a year. So we already had to go through and reduce things. And ambition and quality is the one that's changed most over this year. For example, we put in a big commitment around training up our staff on conflict resolution. And we had to stop all of that and pivot to a really big piece of training work around mental health. We actually spent £3,500 on training everybody in the organisation around mental health and making 4 of us mental health first aiders. And that's because we had to respond to the needs of our staff, the needs of our artists, our board, and the sector as a whole. Next, please. The hardest one for us has been environmental responsibility, not because we don't think it's important, but because some of our practices go against some of the principles that are out there. Access counters some of the principles around best practice. And we found there was so much information out there that we would have to have 2-3 full-time members of staff just reading all of that information in order to determine what to do. So it's been the hardest one for us to find our own path through. And in fact, we've had to really slow down in order to do it properly. So we're not as far ahead as we would like, but we're much surer about the steps that we're taking. What we did is we put one of our lead through the IETM European Green School, which was a series of seminars and then individual mentoring. And we've come out of that with not signed off yet, because we're checking it obviously with our board and with our artists and with our freelancers and with our staff, but we've come up with a statement that I'll just talk through in a moment. Next. This image is chosen deliberately for here. It's of 250,000 helium balloons lifting up a disabled artist from the floor at Sydney Opera House. And again, a piece that if we were doing now would have very different caveats around it in relation to environmental practices. It is actually an environmental piece. The helium is not medical level. The balloons are all biodegradable. But when this piece was in Australia, the artist did receive death threats because they weren't as overt about publicising its environmental credibility as perhaps they should have been. So our environmental statement, this is just an extract from it. Next slide, please. Says, our focus is on fairness and making a positive impact. We strongly believe that achieving climate justice is inseparable from social justice. The harsh reality is that the impacts of climate change hit some communities much harder, especially those who contributed the least to the problem. Next. However, not everyone has the same access to sustainable living options. At Unlimited, we advocate for better access and inclusion and challenge ableist systems as a priority. We understand that sometimes what's good for the planet might clash with what's accessible for everyone. Next. Wheelchair user dressed as a snail in an outdoor environment. For us, it was really important to make that statement and to build our own confidence around being able to say, no, access first, environment second. We didn't have that confidence at the beginning of the process, but everyone we've spoken to along the journey has agreed with us that that social justice route is the right one for us to take. Next slide, please. So what's worked for us? Taking our time, changing our plans, but taking our time and involving everyone, our team, our board, our artists. Going back to first base, to those basic principles, rather than just shoving in a meaningless target because that's what we thought we should do. And then setting purposeful targets and then monitoring the progress. Taking a slower route round to make sure we're really sure about what we're monitoring has been the win for us. We do that across all of the investment principles, but when we got stuck, that was the route that really helped us with environmental responsibility. Next slide, please. A celebratory slide to end on, a Vogue ball. Somebody clad in black leather, probably pleather, to be honest, with their hands raised in a power salute. Next slide, please. I've just put the all of our social handles and our info at weareunlimited.org.uk email address up there, because we're really interested in making contact with other organisations who have a social justice base within their environmental principle IP, or people who are really interested in inclusion and relevance, where we might have resources that might help you. So we really hope that we can have discussions. And I think somebody mentioned earlier that peer support is one of the ways through this. And for us, peer support has been the way that we've been able to find the wood through the trees. There's so much information out there on the Arts Council site, on other sites. There's just so much there. Trying to work out which bits of it to look at, we found peer support to be the most valuable way of doing that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jo. Wonderful to hear from you. We're going to stop the session there. Thanks so much to everybody for attending. As I say, all the information, slides and questions and answers will follow through you in the next few days. So thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.